My next guest, he is an avid NFL fan. He does some great work for Bleacher Report. Please welcome onto the show, Connor Rogers. How you doing, Connor?
Good, Jose. Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for coming on, man. I know you're pretty busy schedule. You have a lot of good work done over there for Bleacher Report, man. How you been?
Good. It's always interesting after the draft, winding down. It's like you're going 120 miles an hour, and then you get to hit the brakes a little bit and put it on cruise control. So things have been good. It was a fun year. It was a different year, obviously, with the pandemic, the height of the
Yeah.
pandemic, especially during that football season and that early draft time, where there's absolute changes and stuff. But it was a really successful year, and now it's on to the next one.
Awesome. Now, what do you do for Bleacher Report if you don't mind telling the audience that, Connor?
Yeah, so I'm the lead NFL draft analyst there. Essentially, my work is covering the college football season during the year, and of course, a little bit of NFL, but a lot of college football during the year. And then basically, when that page turns December, January, it's just full draft mode, evaluating, I would say, around 400 to 500 players and making rankings up to 250 players for our draft coverage. That we do live all 3 days, which is basically night one goes on, we're live. Me, Adam Lefko, and Akib Talib was my co-analyst this year, and we had a lot of other good analysts chime in, whether it was RG3, Reggie Wayne, Cam Jordan, and we do the same thing night two, and then day three, I'm still on there. It was me and Taylor Rooks because you're getting through the nitty gritty, right? You're talking
Of
about
course.
rounds four and on through the draft, and you know those 3 days are crazy. But the lead up is where the work gets done, is
Of
where you're
course.
doing all your research. We did lead up shows previewing all the prospect groups. And during a non-pandemic year, I'm usually on the road during the college
Yeah.
football season, at least every other week, going to games and getting a feel of what's going on in the college football world. So it's a unique role. It's, as the draft world has really grown into this bigger presence, it's almost like the draft is the NFL's second Super Bowl of the year when you look at the viewers and the league wide interest. And
Yeah.
yeah, I absolutely love doing it.
Awesome. Now, did you miss traveling and going out there to check out all these players in person?
I really did. I
Yeah.
That's the one part that was very tough because working from home, if anything, I got through more film and a lot more done this year. I think though, not being on the road, there's a lot of different negatives that come with that. Whether it's obviously just going to new places, right? The
Of
human
course.
element of it is seeing new places, but of course, being on the field during warmups, being at the games, getting a feel for the players. I'll tell you what, too, just the people that and run into from a just traveling standpoint, contacts that don't live. I'm in the tri-state area, so for
Yeah.
me, I have contacts on the West Coast that maybe that one or two trips I get out to California each year for games is the only time I get to see them before the Senior Bowl or NFL Combine. And that's when a lot of info and data is exchanged and shared, and it really helps you in your job and what you're doing. So there's a lot of things that I missed about traveling this year. And of course, like I said, the human element, it's fun. I like being out on the road. It creates a unique part of my job that I think a lot of people don't get to experience. And it's going to different football atmospheres and stadiums and hanging out with different fans and just seeing different kinds of football cultures. So yes, and the very short version of that is I missed it a lot.
No, definitely. I'm hot off the plane from Tennessee. I just flew in from Tennessee, about 2 in the morning. So I can definitely attest to that. I got to meet a lot of great people there. Definitely checking something new out. Tennessee's awesome.
Were you
It's
in
very nice
Nashville?
and calming. Actually, so I was in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Okay.
Very calm, the very calm part, and it's really nice and calming. Had to do some stuff there for work. Met a bunch of great people. Built some contacts. So can definitely attest to what you're saying there. But now, since I was in Tennessee, it's only fitting that I start off with this, giving you like, I wanted to start off with a fresh story here. People were going crazy everywhere. Julio Jones, right? The acquisition for the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee's all about its sports teams. They love their volunteers, but most importantly, they love their Tennessee Titans on there. What did you make of this, man?
Well, I think when you look at it, number one, it's a really, really good move when you just talk about the fact that this is a franchise that has had success recently and they've come up short, obviously, but they've had a lot of things going right for them. I think they believe in the head coach and Mike Vrabel. I think they believe in the quarterback and the career turnaround that he's had and Ryan Tannehill.
Yeah.
And I think that unfortunately they experienced an offseason where they lost two of their top pass catching threats, and that's Corey Davis, who had a breakout year. They didn't pick up his fifth year option. So he had the chance to test free agency, and they knew they weren't going to be able to bring him back. And the New York Jets came out, I believe, on day one of free agency and gave him a really nice contract. So they lose him, right? And yes, they have AJ Brown there, who's still great, but they know this is a group that needs to win down the field, win in a variety of ways. They need a lot of help. And they lost Jonnu Smith at tight end, a mismatched player that, how many tight ends get real carries? And this is somebody that would hand the ball to. So I think they were in a position where they they didn't have a lot of answers necessarily in free agency right away in the pass catching options. I think in the draft, they obviously knew they had a lot of needs to fill where they were going to have to get creative. And this was the way to do it at this point,
Of
where
course.
they got a legitimate number one wide receiver, a legitimate game changer at a point of the offseason where everything's a bargain, right? When you're doing
Of course.
business in June, traditionally everything's a bargain. There's not a lot of trades that happen or signings that happen that either reset the market in terms of dollars or reset the trade market in terms of return. And when you look at the Julio Jones trade, it was a second round pick and change for a player that, yes, he's 32 years old. Yes, he's making a lot of money. Yes, he missed time last year. And there's reports that he, traditionally nurses injuries throughout the recent seasons and doesn't get to practice as much. But the bottom line is the track record we have of Julio Jones before that, and when he played in those 8 or 9 games this last year, he makes a difference in a way that not a lot of wide receivers can. And I think when he's on the field, that'll also take away some of that bracket coverage that AJ Brown would have saw. And that's a lot to ask for a young receiver to take on those responsibilities. So I think when you look at it, I had significant questions about Tennessee and the losses they had to deal with in this free agency period. And, that they did have dollars, but they went out and spent a lot of it on somebody like Bud Dupree. They felt like they needed to really enhance their defense, especially when they run into whether it be the Chiefs, whether it be the Browns, whoever it may be, these high powered offenses in the AFC. So they knew they needed to add some firepower on the defensive free agency. They were still able to add a significant offensive weapon. Let's not forget, they also endured a lot of offensive coaching staff changes as well, losing Arthur
Of
Smith.
course.
So the Tennessee side, it's a gamble, but it's one that makes 1,000,000% sense. The Falcons side of it, I think when you look at it, I have some questions here. Now, trading him, it isn't always in your hands. It's clear that Julio wanted a fresh start. It's clear they wanted to do right by him. I have no problem with that. The way they handled this, it doesn't feel like there's a long-term outlook right now for the Falcons here, right? If Julio
Of
Jones
course.
made it clear he wanted out well before the draft and you were going to reciprocate those feelings, well, it's just weird to me to not completely turn the page over for this franchise when one of your best veteran players is leaving. So they're stuck in between. They have Matt Ryan restructured, so he's going to probably be there at least the next 2 years, but you move on from Julio. Well, this was a rare chance to get a franchise quarterback where you're picking. I like Kyle Pitts, but once again, you only have so many opportunities to take a franchise quarterback. So they feel like a team to me that still wants to compete for the playoffs while also knowing in the back of their minds a rebuild should not be far away. They didn't get optimal value for Julio Jones. They got an okay deal, not a terrible one, not a great one. I just feel like they're very stuck in the middle right now and a hard team to figure out where do I think they're a Super Bowl contender this year? Absolutely not. I don't even know if they're going to make the playoffs. It would be a
Yeah.
surprise if they did. Do I think they're bad enough where they're going to be picking in the top three and have a chance at a franchise
Probably
quarterback?
not.
Absolutely not. I always say it. Treading water is the last place you want to be in the NFL, and that's where the Falcons find themselves right now.
Definitely. Like the thing about this Atlanta team, it definitely feels like there's no clear direction right now. Like, are we trying to win or are
Yeah.
we trying to get a high enough draft pick? They were in great position to land one of these top quarterbacks, which obviously a lot of people have debated, and you're probably one of the guys to talk to about this. But people are saying that the quarterback talent pool coming out of college next year is definitely an obvious decline when you're
Yeah.
comparing the talent that's coming out this year. What can you say about that, Connor?
Right now, right? And we always have a breakout
Of
guy or
course.
two. Right now, though, it's not what we've seen in recent years. I remember this time last year when I was doing my early college evaluations of the top 50 to 100 players. We released our top 15 on the show I was doing at the time and Stick to Football. And for me, I had Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and Trey Lance, I think, all in the top 10 of that top 15. So you're sitting there and going, these are high powered, legitimate upside, but legitimate high floor quarterback prospects right now coming into the season. That should all be top 10 picks. Now, we saw Justin Fields take a little bit of a fall, but nothing crazy. And everybody still has
Yeah.
significant high hopes for Justin Fields. And we also had seasons where Mac Jones and Zach Wilson were fantastic players and had those Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield kind of rises in their own rights and were worthy of being selected where they were. Zach Wilson going number 2, Mac Jones going 15th overall. We had 5 first round quarterbacks and
Yeah.
5 worthy first round quarterbacks in this situation. Right now, I mean, I sit here and I look at it and go, okay, I could see it with Sam Howell, but I don't think he's a number 1 overall pick kind of guy. He's somebody that, he's young, right? And he
Sure.
deserves this season to take that next step. But if the draft was today for next year, I wouldn't think he goes in the top 5. Malik Willis has great traits and a lot of upside, but the play-by-play consistency needs to improve in terms of accuracy and ball security. So I like his upside and think he could be a round 1 player as well. But the fact that I'm sitting here and trying to sell you on guys rather than going, well, we have this guy Trevor Lawrence who should be a number 1 pick. We have this guy Justin Fields who should be a top 5 pick. We have this guy Trey Lance who should be a top 10, top 5 pick. Like, I don't have those this year when we had 3 of them last year. And it's a very curious situation where is there's going to be an outlier this year where we get 4 breakouts and we have another great quarterback class? Probably not.
Probably. Now, what's your analysis right now, or even early analysis on Spencer Rattler? Because he's a guy that I've been very critical of. He's 6'1", obviously right now in the NFL. Height's not a huge thing right now because we've seen players right now come in and defy those odds very early on now. But Spencer Rattler is a very interesting one here. Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley's got great coaching. Obviously, Lincoln Riley, you can literally say he's got the Midas touch when it comes to quarterbacks. A factory of these guys coming out now. What's your analysis on Spencer Rattler? Is he a guy to keep your eye on?
A ton of talent and someone you have to keep an eye on because, quite frankly, Jose, how many quarterbacks have we seen explode in this system, right? It's
Especially.
number 1 pick galore. It's someone like Jalen Hurts that teams were talking about as an NFL running back at
Yeah.
one point in his draft cycle. He played so well in that offense under Lincoln Riley. He ended up being a second round selection and is now a starting quarterback for the Eagles. So there is clear development in this system, whether it's Kyler Murray, whether it's Jalen Hurts, whether it's Baker Mayfield, who came into his senior year as a projected round 4, round 5 quarterback and goes number 1 overall. Now, what I'll say is on the flip side, Rattler is not like those guys where, Kyler, he was one of the greatest high school quarterbacks of all time, but everybody thought he'd play baseball. So all 3 of those guys were never projected to be these superstar quarterbacks for different reasons. Spencer Rattler, as a high school player and a recruit coming in there, he's expected to be a future number 1 overall pick, a top guy, all these things. I don't think it's been perfect so far. I don't even think it's been great. I think it's just been okay for the expectations. Now, he's a young guy. I think he can absolutely shine this year. I think he can explode in that system. I think the decision making is very, very questionable at times. And I think on the flip side, it's very Jekyll and Hyde, right? There's plays where he looks like he can do everything that Russ or Rodgers do out on the field, where he can get out of the pocket and fire the ball on the move down the field 50 yards or whatever it may be. So, for me, is he going to be in round 1 of mock drafts or anything like that? Of course he will be because
Yeah.
it's all projections and based on upside. But is he there right now? No, absolutely not. I'm a little excited about him, but I have significant questions as well, where he's not on that preseason pedestal that Trevor or Fields or Lance were those years, or Tua or Herbert were their years, because let's not forget Burrow was a riser, but there was a lot of expectations for Herbert and Tua before those years, and we saw how high they went. He's not in that class at all, quite frankly, right now for me. And we'll see. He could have a great year. He can go number 1 overall. Wouldn't shock me at all. But right now, it's a lot of raw talent.
Do you go back when you're analyzing these players, and you even go back to like high school and how they were in high school, character concerns, issues with their how they won, how they played? Do you go back to all the way down back to high school when you're doing these analysis, Connor?
It can come down to a couple different things. I think from an analytical reason of, track and field numbers and
Mhm.
athleticism and things like that, absolutely. But when you talk about what a guy was at 17 compared to what he is at 20, 21, 22,
Yeah,
23, it's a dangerous game because the development, that's why I have so many 5 stars that completely bust and don't end up being top 3 round picks.
yeah,
That's why we have no stars. Look at Khalil Mack, for instance, goes to Buffalo and ends up, we all saw how that storyline went. He's one of a million guys like that.
yeah.
that end up being star players. You look at Zach Wilson, he couldn't get a look from Utah where he wanted to go. He goes to BYU and he turns into a superstar. So, Trey Lance, he wanted to go to Minnesota and PJ Fleck wanted him to play safety. And he goes, I'm a quarterback. And he goes to North Dakota State and turns into a superstar.
Yeah.
So there's things you can take away, but for the most part, you need to be careful of forming a definitive, outlook on a player from their high school. What I think high school helps with is expectations. If a guy is a 5-star player and he's coming into a place where he's going to play football, he's going to be on the field his first 2 years of being there, you're going to spotlight that player and want to see if he's the real deal and how he takes to those expectations and hype. So there's certain things it helps with, but honestly, when it comes down to it at the end of the day, as a draft evaluator, I just start with the college level of the
Okay.
player they are and what they develop into through those ranks.
Awesome. So now let me shift to this. NFL draft happened. You're very busy. Now we're going in through the later parts here of the off season. Which team do you think really, really improved themselves and really helped themselves out by having a solid draft? Because when I look at draft and I look at certain teams that I really like and really stuck out to me, I like the Panthers. Now they got Sam Darnold, who I think it's not fair to really judge him off based off what happened in New York. I think he needed a fresh start. Joe Brady, it looks like he's going to do a good job with him. I really like him. And I really like the kind of draft that they had. JC Horn, who can develop into a really good cover shutdown corner. I like Terrence Marshall. I know there's injury concerns there, but he's got some speed and he's got size there. I like the depth that they added. Plus, I like the draft that they had last year on the defensive side when they drafted guys like Jeremy Chin on there. What do you think right now, or whose draft really stuck out to you as far as how well they improved?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Because this is where teams are rebuilt and this is where seasons can be changed. And I think the first one for me would be the Detroit Lions, who
Okay,
there's no expectations for this year. They're in a new regime there with GM Brad Holmes, first time GM, first time head coach Dan Campbell. And there's going to be a lot of turnover there over the next 3 years. They have a lot of picks, a lot of change on the way, where they're building a program. They're not expected to compete for the playoffs this year. And this is how you start to do that. When you look at taking Penei Sewell at 7, I thought he was the second best overall player. Levi Onwuzurike in the second round, a gap shooting, pass rushing defensive tackle. Aleem McNeil in round 3, totally different defensive tackle, two gapping kind of stop the run player. Ifatu Melifonwu, cornerback out of Syracuse. I think he's a starter, especially in a very zone heavy scheme. We'll see how they run their defense over there. But either way, a great athlete with a lot of length. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, the wide receiver out of USC, a jump ball kind of player. And Derek Barnes, the linebacker out of Purdue, who I think can actually be a starter, a future starter in this league. So for the fact the Lions come into this draft, they have holes all over the place because Matt Patricia left that roster absolutely tattered and really beat up. Now you got a franchise tackle. You got two starting defensive tackles. You got a starting corner. You have a wide receiver that can help at some point, and a linebacker that could be a sub package player that can help as well. That's a lot of volume in a system, the draft, that
yeah,
teams don't get a lot of volume. They hit on 1, 2, maybe 3 picks on a really, really good year. I think the
right.
Lions are going to hit on a lot of those picks. So I love what they did. And it's tough, right? It's tough. You're coming into a situation where you have a lot of players that aren't yours. You're trying to mold this roster together. You're trying to show ownership that you are going to be competitive right away, but you also have a really long way to go. I think they did a really good job. And then I look at the Cleveland Browns, who many years, the things I'm saying about the Lions, you might say about them. They were a team that won what? One game in 2 seasons combined at one point. I mean,
Of
that's
course.
really tough to rebound from. The Browns have done a good job of building one of the most complete rosters in football. And when you just look at them getting a starting corner in Greg Newsome in round 1, and you look at them getting Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the Swiss Army knife player for the middle of the defense from Notre Dame in round 2, I think the Browns are really, really onto something and they're really understanding how to build something. And this isn't the first year they've done that. They've now shown to be consistent, really, really impressive drafters at this point. And that's because they hit on later on picks. Just going across the board, you look at somebody like Tony Fields taken in round 5. I think he could be a special team sub package linebacker right away. Give you special teams help. He can come in on certain downs because he's got a really good instincts as a linebacker, a lighter guy. So I like what the Browns are doing. I really, really do. And it might not be the most volume from a draft, but I think they got impact talent at the top of it. So franchises that are pretty historic NFL franchises in the Lions and the Browns that have had a rough go of it in this era of football, I think they did some really, really nice things.
Yeah, I lived in Cleveland for about 2 years there, and I'm very happy. I have a lot of friends there that have stuck there through the tough times. Being a Brownie fan.
They're diehard fans,
Yeah, the dog
very
pound is
diehard
legit.
fans.
The dog pound is legit, so I'm very happy to see that. And I agree with you there. I think that the first two picks that they hit, the Browns did, are great impact players on there. Let me shift to this. The NFL though is all about quarterbacks, right? If you nail the quarterback, everything else will figure itself out at some point, right? For some of these teams. Now, Trevor Lawrence was the big name, Justin Fields. Then we had guys like Zach Wilson come out, Mac Jones come here. My question to you here, Connor, is when it came to drafting a quarterback, did the Patriots mess up by not trading up to get Justin Fields because he was within reach of them at that point to the point where Justin fell? Was it a mistake? What's your take on this?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, right? Because you look at it and go, you know, I don't think Mac Jones will be a bad player in their system. I don't think he'll ever be a great one. I just think he'll be very average at best. And
I agree.
with Justin Fields, I think there's a bigger spectrum, right? There's a spectrum where he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL because he's got a power arm. He's a big bodied, mobile guy that has played very well at the highest level of college football multiple times. And it goes back to our conversation about high school players. These were the expectations for Justin Fields for a very long time, along with Trevor Lawrence. Now, there's obviously a low floor at some point with Justin Fields too, whether it's holding on to the ball too long and trying to make a play and getting used to that speed of the NFL level. And I think Mac Jones is going to have the same problems, to be fair. I think that all these rookie quarterbacks are going to have those problems. So that's why any rookie quarterback can have a low floor. So it's not that Justin Fields is a perfect prospect. That's not what I'm saying. But when you look at ceilings, that's what you need to bet on when you're drafting your quarterback. And I like Justin Fields significantly better than Mac Jones. I thought Justin
I agree
Fields was
with
the
you.
third best quarterback in this draft. I thought Mac Jones was a fringe round one player. I would have made the move, especially all the additions they made in free agency. They didn't need to use all of these picks necessarily. So I would have made the move. I think Justin Fields would have been a star in New England. But at the end of the day, they wanted to sit tight. They didn't want to get involved in that trade market. And the Bears make out very, very well and get a player that I think can truly turn their franchise around.
Definitely. My concern here is, I'm like you, or look, I've been harsh on Mac Jones. I wasn't a fan of it. At some point when I'm watching the draft, I try to turn my fan on, instead of just trying to be like so unbiased here because, it is my team. I'm a huge Patriots fan here. And so the Mac Jones thing, I wasn't a fan of. I wanted Justin Fields. And like to the point that you said, I think he's going to be an average quarterback, a good quarterback. You'll be competent with him. But what's the standard in New England? It's been winning championships. And
Yeah,
yes,
you're
I know
right.
it's hard. You lose the greatest quarterback of
Well,
all time, but it's
I mean, you're
championships.
you're absolutely right because look at the teams that are consistently in the upper echelon of the NFL that are competing. And sure, you have your Cinderella stories, Nick
Of
Foles
course.
winning a Super Bowl or, Jimmy Garoppolo making it there. Now didn't win, and they didn't win because of him, for the most part.
Yeah, you missed
The
that throw.
teams that are always back in the picture every year, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, Aaron Rodgers and the Packers, Russell Wilson and the
And the
Seahawks,
Bucks.
wherever Tom Brady plays.
Yeah.
It's this is the league is run by upper level to elite quarterbacks. And even getting back to our conversation about the Titans, a lot of people don't want to admit this. Ryan Tannehill has been an upper tier quarterback for the last 2 years, it feels like. He's
Yeah,
played at
great
a
numbers.
really very high level, a very high level. So, and the Titans, no coincidence, are in the playoff picture. And for teams like Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence, the Jets with Zach Wilson, the Patriots with Mac Jones, the Niners will be fine because they're so well coached and so talented. But Trey Lance, I think, has a huge ceiling. Justin Fields and the Bears. For those teams to be back in the hunt, they need those guys to not be probably mediocre. They need them to be really, really good. And those guys all have a chance to be really, really good, in my opinion, except Mac Jones. I don't ever, like I said, I don't think
Agree.
he's a bad player. It's hard for me to ever sit here and go, wow, Mac Jones is a top 5, top 7 quarterback in the NFL. I don't see it. Now, New England is so well run and well coached that can they overcome that like the Niners did with Jimmy G? You can, it's not a predicament you want to back yourself into because it's a very hard way to succeed in the NFL.
Definitely. It's it's funny. So I was talking to a couple people, the Milwaukee Bucks fans, right? And their second best player is Chris Middleton, and it kind of like all. And I have a point to this here. Do you want Chris Middleton being your second guy on your team, taking the game-winning shot to like advance into the playoffs? Like, how nervous are you going to be if Mac Jones is the guy that has to get you, do
That
the
you
two
nailed
minute
it.
drill, down five in the playoffs to move on? With Brady, there's a sense like we got spoiled, like, oh, we're fine. It's time. He
And
doesn't.
I think to build off your point, it's a great reference what you just made because it's very, very relevant right now. And it's, when you look at it, I think when things go wrong, right? When you get punched in the face in the NFL, which happens a lot of teams in the first half, say teams learn how to play Mac Jones and that athleticism is not there to do something different. What's your adjustment, right? Like things aren't going to be perfect week to week. Mac Jones is very accurate. He's very calm in the pocket. He throws a good football in the intermediate and short area. And the problem is, I thought the other guys in this draft do that as well. But when things go wrong for those guys and guys aren't open, those other four guys have shown the ability to extend plays or create plays, whether it's Trevor, whether it's Fields, whether it's Zach Wilson, and whether it's Trey Lance. They're
Yeah.
very impressive athletes in a league where the best quarterbacks, for the most part, and Tom Brady's an outlier because he's Tom Brady,
Of
can
course.
make things happen with their legs. And I just don't think we've seen that from Mac Jones where that would scare me. You don't have to be Michael Vick. You don't have to be Lamar Jackson. But can you move like Rodgers or Russ? Can you get out of the pocket? Can you run away from defensive ends and linebackers? Can you at least buy yourself time? I think that is a question that evaluators have to start asking themselves. Is it a bonus like it used to be back in the day when I started doing this, or is it a necessity? And I think
Yeah.
the line is moving closer to necessity than it's ever been.
Definitely. The game has changed real quick as we're going to start going towards the end of this thing. The game has definitely changed. The thing about all these quarterbacks that you mentioned versus Mac Jones is they all have something, an ability that really pops out. Now, if you're going to tell me Mac Jones is great in the pocket, can throw, here's the thing though, folks, and I'm telling this to everybody here. He's had two to four players that are wide receivers that went in the top 15 of the NFL draft within the last 2 years that he's gotten to work with. The NFL is all about discomfort. You have to adjust and adapt. That's the nerve-wracking part when it comes to this. Real quick, Connor, before we wrap this up, is there anything you'd like to tell the audience?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a fun conversation. I love recapping the draft and seeing where these rookies go. And I even love when it's, when you're wrong about things at the end of the year and you look at
Yeah.
it and me and you will be sitting here like, wow, Mac Jones, rookie of the year. Who saw that
Oh
coming?
my gosh.
Which I know would make you very happy. But yeah, love doing this. If anyone wants to follow more of it, I'm at Connor J Rogers on Twitter. Do all my draft work there, Bleacher Report, and man, it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Connor. I appreciate you taking the time out of the day to come on this show. And to everyone listening, thanks for sticking around, folks. I truly appreciate you. Have a safe weekend. I'll catch you later, guys. Goodbye.